Hi, and welcome to what I now pronounce my ASMR era on YouTube, I guess. Which is wild, because if you've been to my profile, you see that I have some years of YouTube history behind me and a lot of deleted videos. And they're all something different and all over the place. So this is my new era, I guess. So hi. Nah, actually, I just want to try something out. So, picture this. You are a person and you want to read a book, your favorite book, but you also kind of really sleepy, and you're looking for like ASMR, and you find book ASMR, but not of the book that you've been wanting to read. So that's sad. So I was like, I don't think there is Heaven Official's Blessing ASMR, at least not in a way that someone's reading the book so that I can fall asleep to it. And also, I don't mean this in a way that you should probably read the books yourself first. So I'm gonna be reading the extras from Heaven Official's Blessing today, because I just finished that series and I somehow need to fill this void. Because it's been driving me insane. Don't worry, I found another series by the same author that you're probably very much familiar with. Obviously, I am starting now with Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, but I have not finished that yet. Besides the animation, I've watched the anime. It's not an anime, it's a donghua. I know, I'm sorry. I've watched the donghua a little over a year ago. But I'm still waiting to pick up my book. And it took me a little over a year to finish all 8 novels of Heaven Official's Blessing. So it would take me probably a few months to finish Murao Sushi. And I really hope I pronounced that. Oh my god, I did not want to use to. Okay, anyways. So for this reading, I will use the English dub mostly as reference to how to pronounce the names. So if I say anything wrong, I am deeply sorry. Please don't be offended. Please just correct me. And yeah, I thought that was a quite cool idea. So, but before we start, just a little reminder that the entire series is rated mature. So, this is not a children's story. Now that we got this out of the way, please enjoy. We'll start with chapter 138. That is extra free, with the name The Ghost King's Bedtime Story, which I find pretty fitting. 𝐺ℎ𝑜₉ had fallen ill. Although it was a minor illness, how very curious it was that ghost kings could even get sick. When Shilian returned to Thousand Lights Temple to check up on 𝐺ℎ𝑜ng's calligraphy practice as usual, he was highly concerned to find him slightly feverish. He pushed 𝐺ℎ𝑜ng onto the altar. Yes, since there were no divine statues in the way, the two of them often took a tumble on the temple's spacious altar, then only got more worried after he felt his cheeks and forehead. "You're so hot." 𝐺ℎ𝑜ng laughed. "I always been hot at the sight of you, Gaga. If you keep touching me, I'll get bothered too." Shilian blinked, then hastily tried to pretend he was blushing out of anger. "Naughty, even when you're sick." "What did I say?" 𝐺ℎ𝑜ng protested, acting innocent. "I am very well behaved. Gaga, stop worrying. A small thing like this is nothing to be concerned about." But Shilian could hear that his voice was deeper and scratchier than usual, and he could see the slight fatigue that colored his brow. "Get some rest then," Shilian said. "I'll keep you company here for the next few days until you're better." He gathered the stationery for writing practice and brought it to the altar. 𝐺ℎ𝑜ng patted the spot next to him. "Is Gaga not coming up to join me?" But if you went up there, when would Shilian have a chance to come back down? At that point, they could forget about doing anything else for a while. "Nah," Shilian declined politely. My Sanlang has overworked himself. Nah, Hua Xiang laughed. How could Sanlang ever be afraid of hard work when it comes to working Gege hard? Shilling ignored him, refusing to participate in his games. Instead, he focused on putting together a calligraphy copybook. Hua Xiang flipped onto his side and stared at him, one hand propping up his cheeks. His intense, rapt gaze always made Shillian blush, no matter how many times he was the subject of it. Sanlang, look at the copybook, not me, chided Shillian, sounding uncomfortable. Hua Xiang sighed. Gege, truth be told, just the sight of this stuff makes my head hurt. But since you're the one who wrote it for me, I can't bear to look away. Maybe staring at copybooks too much is the cause of my current condition. What condition is that? Shillian questioned. Hua Xiang snickered. It's better for my health to look at you instead, Gege. You're a far better sight to stare at than copybooks. Maybe I'll heal from exposure to you alone. Feeling helpless yet amused, Shillian put down the brush and shook his head. Why do you spout so much nonsense these days? Nothing serious ever comes out of that mouth of yours. All right, fine, I get it. We'll go with what you want. No more copybooks. What shall we do instead? We don't have to do anything, Hua Xiang said. Just keep me company like this and I'll be better in no time. Shillian felt Hua Xiang's forehead again. Although he was a handsome man, the way he was whining made Shillian think of a red-cheeked child peeking out of his nest of warm blankets in the winter. Affection and tenderness filled him at the thought. After some consideration, he said, How about this? I happened to collect something interesting today. He rummaged through his sleeve and fished out an item. It's an old book someone threw away. I was planning to flip through it sometime, Shillian said. Why don't I read you a few stories? The little book in his hand was very old and ragged, with yellowing pages that gave it a strange air of scholarship. Others must have flipped through it countless times before. But Hua Xiang said no. Why not? Shillian asked, curious. Books like that are always full of tales people spun about the other heavenly officials, Hua Xiang replied lazily, and I already know everything about the ancient sordid trifles. None of that nonsense interests me, so why would I trouble Gege to tell me about it? That was true. Hua Xiang knew all the terrible secrets of countless powerful figures from across the realms. If Gege must read something, why not pick another subject? Hua Xiang said. Your own story, for example. That suggestion made Shillian chuckle. Is there anyone who knows more about me or has seen more of me than you? Tell me even more, Hua Xiang pleaded. I want to hear it. I can't hear enough about you. He was completely serious. Shillian could tell. He carefully brushed away the strands of hair spilling over Hua Xiang's cheek. As he did so, he inadvertently glanced at the book and exclaimed in amazement, Sanlang, I think this book is about us. Is it? Shillian flipped through the book again. It is. It's filled with stories about the great rat-robed ghost king and the scrub immortal. That's you and me, right? That piqued Hua Xiang's interest. Oh? What kind of stories? Shillian was also curious to learn about the tales that common people had crafted about him and Hua Xiang, so he opened the storybook and started reading aloud. Once upon a time, there was a great ghost king who loved to wear red. Although the great ghost king was a powerful man and possessed mountains of gold and silver, he was very unhappy. That was because he was very lonely and yearned for a wife. Shillian snorted and laughed out loud, finding it a little hard to continue. Is the lonely ghost king waiting in an empty nest? Hua Xiang quirked an eyebrow. It's not wrong. I get very lonely when Gege isn't around. Shillian felt his cheeks go hot and kept reading. Once upon a time, there was a great ghost king who loved to wear red. Although the great ghost king was a powerful man and possessed mountains of gold and silver, more than a lifetime's worth of fortune, he was very unhappy. That was because he was very lonely and yearned for a wife. Although he waited for centuries, there was no sign of his beloved, so he went to request the guidance of an old immortal who was highly skilled in the art of divination. The great Ghost King asked the old immortal, "Where is my wife?" The old immortal told him, "You and the one you're waiting for will unite in marriage upon a mountain. Your wife will come riding in a marriage sedan and wearing red bridal robes." The great Ghost King was determined to find his wife, so he went to the mountain and waited patiently. Meanwhile, in a place far, far away, there was a scrap immortal. The scrap immortal was a collector of scrap, which was why he was the poorest of the heavenly officials. He was even poorer than many mortals. However, despite his extreme poverty, he was very kind. One day, on his way home from collecting scraps, the scrap immortal saw a girl crying by the roadside. The scrap immortal asked the girl, "Miss, why do you weep so?" "I am about to marry," the girl replied tearfully, "but I must cross a mountain on the day I depart, and a ghost groom lives on that mountain. He steals brides who pass by. Only a few have ever been saved from his clutches. I will be taken and killed." The scrap immortal was sympathetic to her plight and resolved to rid the people of this evil. He decided to marry in that woman's state to vanquish the monster. The scrap immortal had two good friends. Because one was ornery and one was petty, they were called the ornery immortal and the petty immortal. As they fought each other with their fists, they explained to him, "The ghost groom is the great Ghost King with a very bad temper, and he is very sly. He detests gods. If you attempt to capture him, you will definitely be eaten." But the scrap immortal was adamant, and thus they built him a marriage sedan. On the day of his departure, the scrap immortal wore beautiful wedding robes borrowed from Lady Windmaster in order to disguise himself as a bride. He mounted the wedding sedan and was carried up the mountain by his two friends, who fought and attacked each other the entire way. Wicked gales bellowed in the pitch-black night. When the wedding sedan reached the top of the mountain, there was no one left by the scrap immortal's side. He waited and waited, until his groom finally arrived. When the scrap immortal lifted his bridal veil, he was surprised to discover that the great Ghost King was an exceptionally handsome young man. Even more surprising was that the young groom was very polite. He was well-mannered, gentle, and considerate. He did not remove his human skin to reveal a monstrous true form, nor did he force the scrap immortal to do anything untoward. He was nothing like the horrible great Ghost King of legend. The mountain was immense indeed, and the great Ghost King brought the scrap immortal to his lair within its depths. "From this moment onward, I am your husband, and you are my beloved wife," the great Ghost King said to the scrap immortal. "This entire mountain belongs to me, and now to you as well. You can roam wherever you please. However, remember this. On the other side of the mountain, there are two houses that you must never enter." "Why not?" asked the scrap immortal. His groom, the great Ghost King, answered thus, "That is my secret. There is no need for you to know. However, it will be impossible for you to enter the houses even if you wish to do so. A barrier is installed at each gate, and you must possess something of mine before you can cross." "What is that something?" asked the scrap immortal. The great Ghost King answered, "One house hides filthy trash. To open its door, you must use something of mine found on me by touch, something that is copious in amount. The other house hides a formidable spiritual weapon. To open its door, you must use something of mine not found on me by touch, something that is burning." Naturally, the scrap immortal did not listen. Although he pretended to be compliant and docile in front of the Ghost King, the scrap immortal snuck off to the other side of the mountain as soon as he left, leaping and flying across walls and roofs. Sure enough, he heard terrifying screams and cries for help coming from the house that hid the filthy trash. The scrap immortal suspected that this was where the missing brides were being confined. Thus he decided to steal something of the great Ghost King's to open the mysterious house. But what was the something he needed to steal? The great Ghost King had a head of long, shiny, jet-black hair, which was sometimes loose and at other times tied up crookedly. The first plan the scrappy mortal devised was to steal a few strands every day. And so he asked, "May we sleep in the same room?" "Of course," his groom replied politely. "We are married." Thus they moved into the same room. Although they slept in the same bed, the scrappy mortal refused to allow his groom to strip off his clothing. Because of this, the great Ghost King also respectfully refrained from attempting to touch him. However, the scrappy mortal soon discovered that not a single strand of hair fell from the groom's head. There was not one loose hair to be found, no matter how many times he brushed his groom's hair in the morning and before they went to bed at night. None on his pillow, the bed, the floor, or the comb. Now this was becoming a headache. The scrappy mortal took up a sword, hoping to cut a lock of the great Ghost King's hair in secret while he slept. However, the great Ghost King was exceptionally alert, and his eyes shot open as soon as the scrappy mortal drew near him. Even though he had been caught red-handed, the scrappy mortal remained calm. To escape the great Ghost King's suspicion, he immediately cut off a lock of his own hair and gifted it to him. The great Ghost King was elated to receive it. The clever scrappy mortal soon came up with another idea. He asked the great Ghost King, "May I kiss you?" "Of course," his groom replied in delight. "We are married." Thus, the scrappy mortal embraced his ghost groom and kissed him hard for a long time. When at last he'd captured a bit of his groom's taste, he quickly shut his mouth and ran to the other side of the mountain. But when he got there, he discovered that this method wouldn't work. He needed a copious amount of the something, and what he had taken wasn't enough. He could stick his head into the house, but not his body, no matter how hard he tried. He still could not enter. The scrappy mortal was dejected. He had thought that stealing something found on the great Ghost King would be an easy task. He never expected it to be so difficult. The scrappy mortal thought of his good friend Lady Windmaster, and thus paid a visit to the Temple of Wind and Water. "How do I get a copious amount of something that is found on the great Ghost King?" the scrappy mortal asked Lady Windmaster. Lady Windmaster answered, "Ha! Easy. Transform into a woman and consummate your marriage with him." "Done." The scrappy mortal shook his head, for his cultivation method decreed that his spiritual power would be greatly damaged should he lose his virginity. Lady Windmaster's way was no way at all. Just then, Lord Watermaster returned and happened to hear what the lady had said. "Outrageous!" he barked angrily. "How could you say such indecorous words?" And whenever he got angry, Lord Watermaster crushed people to death with money, so the scrappy mortal quickly fled. As he ran, he thought of his two other good friends, Honorary Immortal and Petty Immortal. He decided to ask them what he should do. Honorary Immortal and Petty Immortal were brawling again. As they fought, they told him some incredible news. Because too many people had gone missing, all the heavenly officials would soon attack the mountain together to apprehend the great Ghost King. This information shocked the scrappy mortal, and he became sick with worry. After living with the young Ghost King for many days now, he did not think he would commit such terrible deeds. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Perhaps some other creature was the one who had imprisoned those brides. However, since the scrappy mortal was very poor and had no status, no one listened to him. The scrappy mortal was frantic. If the truth wasn't uncovered soon, the great Ghost King might be attacked by the heavenly officials. With no other options, the scrappy mortal ran back and asked the great Ghost King, "Excuse me, can we consummate our marriage?" "Of course," his groom answered with a broad smile. "We are married." And thus, the scrappy mortal and the great Ghost King consummated their union. During the act, the scrappy mortal held on tightly to the great Ghost King for fear he wouldn't give him copious amounts of the important something. "Can you give all of it to me? Can you give it to me many times?" "Of course," his groom replied gently and considerately, "if that is what you wish." And the scrappy mortal said, "I do." Thus, the clever scrappy mortal received what he'd been seeking. something of the great Ghost King's that he had found on him by touch and in copious amounts. The next day, carrying the something he'd begged for from the Ghost King, the scrubby model went to the house that hid the filthy trash. This time he was able to enter. The moment he opened the door, the scrubby model found many filthy, disheveled corpses discarded inside. Some had already decayed and become nothing but bones. The bodies were dressed in wedding robes. They were probably the missing brides. Hopes dashed, the scrubby model was both shocked and sad. When he turned his head, he was surprised to discover that there was someone standing behind him. The great Ghost King had come before he noticed. The scrubby model was shocked. He recalled what ornery immortal and petty immortal had told him, that the great Ghost King was very sly and that he detested gods. The scrubby model had now lost his spiritual power. Could the great Ghost King have seen through his identity? Had he been lying to him all this time? Angry and hurt, the scrubby model fled, running faster with every step. Yet he ran so fast that he spilled what the great Ghost King had given him, and he was stopped by the barrier at the front of the house. The great Ghost King caught up on the scrubby model and captured him in his arms. He then told the whole story at last. As it turned out, the great Ghost King didn't catch and eat anyone. He was only on this mountain to wait for his fated special someone. One day, he was out on a stroll when he came across a wedding escort party. Terrified, the groom ran off on his own and left behind his weeping bride, who was frozen in place with fear. The great Ghost King hadn't intended to cause trouble, but the bride declared that she no longer wanted to marry a man like that. She left to seek a new life instead of going back whence she came. From whence she came. Similar incidents happened again and again, and the Ghost King decided that he would stay and test this soon-to-be wedded while he waited for his fated special someone. If a groom dared to step forward and protect his bride from the forces of evil, then the great Ghost King would not push this matter further and would allow them to pass. If a despicable groom pushed his bride in front of a monster's gaping maw to buy time for his own escape, then he would be captured and locked inside the house that stored trash. Because many of those despicable grooms were wicked in nature, they would often attempt to kill each other. Eventually, all that remained of them were piles of white bones. They were the corpses that the scrubby model had seen. As for their brides, some had returned home, some had eloped with lovers and escaped to distant lands, and some had started their own families with a different match. The great Ghost King said, "I waited for you for centuries, 𝐺ℎ𝑜𝑠𝑡, and you finally arrived." With the misunderstanding cleared up, the two embraced each other. In order to leave the house, the great Ghost King gave the scrubby model more of his something in copious amounts. Just then, rumblings sounded from the skies. The heavenly officials had been wary of the great Ghost King for a long time, so they had seized this chance to launch an attack. The scrubby model charged out, swinging at random, and beat back a wave of heavenly officials. However, the entire mountain had collapsed from the officials' barrage, and the great Ghost King was buried beneath it. The mountain was enormous, and the scrubby model tried desperately to brace it upon his shoulders, for fear that the great Ghost King would be crushed completely. It suddenly occurred to him that there was another mysterious house he had yet to open. One that hid a formidable spiritual device that could surely push the great mountain away. When he rushed to the cave where the house was located, he was surprised and delighted to find that the great Ghost King was standing inside, perfectly fine and whole, and even stronger than before. The two broke out of the mountain and beat back the heavenly officials who had come to cause trouble. At the end of it all, they sat atop the summit, side by side, to watch the clouds and stars left in the fleeing god's wake. The scrubby model asked his groom, "Didn't you say that in order to enter the house hiding the filthy trash, I needed something found on you by touch and in copious amounts, but the house that hid the spiritual weapon could only be entered with something not found on you by touch that was burning?" Wearing a happy smile, the great Ghost King said, "Yes, but didn't 𝐺ℎ𝑜𝑠𝑡 have that something all along?" It dawned on the scrubby model. The burning something was the ardent heart with which the Ghost King loved him. Thus, the scrubby model and the great Ghost King happily went to consummate their marriage once more, never to part again. Shillian was speechless. Shillian remained speechless. Even now that the story was done, Shillian was still in shock. "What the heck is this?" he said, incredulous. "Isn't this adaptation way over the line? No. What the heck was this nonsense? How was it appropriate for a storybook?" Meanwhile, Huashang had already fallen over on the bed, laughing. "This isn't right at all," Shillian exclaimed, completely baffled. "What is this even supposed to be based on? The incident on Mount Eugen? This isn't how it happened at all. It's completely twisted. And what if a child got their hands on this kind of story? That'd be inappropriate, wouldn't it? Who wrote this? And what's with all these characters who sound familiar but just slightly off?" While the story in the book appeared sweet and innocent at first glance, like a child's bedtime story, upon closer inspection the plot was incredibly over the top, and it was even more depraved than an ordinary spicy story. Yet there was a peculiar sort of sentimentality at the conclusion, and Shillian wondered if there was something wrong with him for feeling moved by it. Huashang chimed in with his own thoughts. It's not entirely twisted. Some parts are correct at least. For example, I certainly do call you Gaga, and it certainly was me who went to receive your wedding sedan, and on the night we consummated our marriage you certainly did. Shillian had thought he'd built up a thick skin after all these years, yet he still constantly flushed bright red in front of Huashang. "How did they know about something like that?" Shillian exclaimed, and aside from that, it was all wrong. Although he knew it was normal for there to be leaks of differences between folktales and their factual origins, after countless adaptations and rewrites, strange results were hardly unexpected. Seeing it for himself still shocked him to the extreme. There had been several points when he'd been too mortified to keep reading, but Huashang had forced him to continue. How aggravating! Oh, how desperately Shillian wanted to beat him up, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Huashang didn't find it surprising either. Obviously, someone involved must have leaked details about the incident. Some rearrangements here, some wrongful conclusions there, and a sprinkle of conjecture on top. Voila, there you have it. "No more reading rubbish books like these," Shillian said, tossing the storybook aside. "Time to rest properly." However, Huashang only clapped. "But it was so well written. The writer's very talented." Then he pleaded, "Listening to it made me feel so much better. Would you read me another, Gaga?" "No," Shillian refused resolutely. "Gaga, my head hurts." "But..." "Gaga..." "Alright, fine." It was rare for Huashang to fall ill, even slightly, and even in the best of times, Shillian usually went along with his every whim and granted every single one of his wishes. How could he resist him at a time like this? Thus, as mortified as he was, he swallowed down his embarrassment and picked up that pervy little book anew. He lay down next to Huashang, whose arm immediately circled around his waist as he did, and forced himself to keep reading. Once upon a time, there was a handsome young crown prince who cultivated deep in the mountains. One night, he was greeted by a mysterious guest. And that was it. That is it. Yeah, that would be one of the extras. And I chose the shortest one on purpose. Anyways, let's not keep this going for too long. I hope you enjoyed. And if you fell asleep while listening to this, then I hope you have very nice dreams. See you next time.